The forest floor was a graveyard of broken things, shattered branches, torn leaves, and her. He saw the crimson first, a horrifying bloom of red staining the dark, damp earth. Then he saw the pale curve of a slender back, marred by deep, vicious gashes that spoke of claws and teeth and merciless intent. A gasp, thin and ragged, tore from her lips as he drew closer, the sound a sliver of glass in the suffocating silence of his territory. Her scent hit him like a physical blow, wild honeysuckle and rain, laced with the coppery tang of terror and agony. It was a scent that should have been foreign, an intruder's scent to be eliminated. But instead, it coiled around his heart and squeezed until he couldn't breathe. His wolf, a creature of brutal instinct and cold control, rose not with aggression, but with a roar of pure, possessive fury so profound it shook the ancient oaks around them. Someone had hurt her. Someone had dared to break this fragile, unknown thing on his land. And in that instant, the ruthless alpha who had never known mercy found its singular, terrifying definition. He would kill anyone who ever tried to hurt her again. Wait before the next revelation unfolds. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. Kalen moved with a predator's grace that belied the storm raging within him. He knelt, his large frame casting a shadow over her trembling form. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, was matted with blood and dirt. She was a shifter, he could tell. But her aura was faint, her inner wolf a flickering ember instead of a steady flame. The wounds were deep, not the work of a rogue driven by madness, but the precise, punishing marks of a pack and forced judgment. This was an execution, or something close to it. He reached out, his calloused fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second before gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin was as cold as marble. A low growl rumbled in his chest, an unconscious promise of retribution. He didn't know her name, her pack, or her crime, and none of it mattered. All that registered was the primal, undeniable command thundering through his veins. Mine, protect, avenge. Without another thought, he scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a bird with broken wings. She whimpered, a soft, pitiful sound that sent a fresh wave of violence through him. He wrapped her in the worn leather of his jacket, tucking her close to the heat of his chest. His strides were long and purposeful as he broke from the tree line, heading directly for the pack house. The guards at the perimeter saw him coming, their eyes widening first at the blood, then at the unconscious female in their alpha's arms. Whispers followed him like ghosts as he crossed the training grounds, every pack member freezing to stare. Kalen, the butcher of Blackwood, the alpha who ruled with an iron fist and a heart of stone, had never shown a shred of compassion for anyone. He demanded strength, punished weakness, and tolerated no outsiders. To see him carrying a wounded stranger with such fierce tenderness was like watching the sun rise in the west. It was impossible, and yet it was happening. He slammed the infirmary door open with his boot. Ilara, the pack's healer, looked up from her poultices, her calm demeanor cracking as she saw the bundle in his arms. "Alpha?" she breathed, her gaze fixed on the blood. "Save her," Kalen commanded, his voice a low rasp. He laid the girl down on the nearest cot with a gentleness that felt alien to his own hands. Her face, now visible in the light, was a canvas of delicate beauty marred by a fading bruise on her cheek. Ilara rushed forward, her professional calm taking over.
"What happened? Who is she?"
"Does it matter?" he snarled, his wolf pushing against his skin, wanting to lash out at the questions. "Just fix her, now." The healer wisely fell silent, her skilled hands immediately going to work, assessing the damage. "The wounds are infected. They've been festering for at least a day. And this?" She paused, gently probing the girl's side. "Broken ribs, severe internal bleeding. Alpha, she's fading fast." Kalen's jaw tightened until it ached. He stood like a stone sentinel beside the cot, watching every move Alara made. He refused to leave, dismissed his beta, Marcus, with a sharp gesture, and ignored the urgent pack business that awaited him. The world outside this room had ceased to exist. There was only the shallow rise and fall of her chest, the scent of her blood, and the volcano of his own rage. Hours bled into a day, then a night. Kalen never moved. He watched as Alara stitched the wounds, set the bones, and forced foul-smelling potions between the girl's pale lips. He saw the small, worn leather pouch clutched in her hand, a grip so tight he knew it must hold something precious. He resisted the urge to see what it was. Her privacy, even in unconsciousness, felt sacred. Marcus entered the room again, his face etched with worry. "Kalen, you need to rest. The pack is on edge. They don't understand." "Let them be on edge," Kalen replied without looking away from the girl. "The Eastern patrols found tracks," Marcus pressed, lowering his voice. "Silver Moon Pack. They crossed our border, Kalen, heavily armed. It was their wolves who did this to her. You know what it means to harbor someone they cast out. It's a challenge." Kalen's eyes finally flickered toward his beta, cold and hard as flint. "Then they can come and face me." "This isn't just a fight, it's a war," Marcus argued. "For a girl you don't even know. She could be a spy, a traitor, anything. She is injured and she was on my land. That makes her my responsibility," Kalen stated, the words tasting like a lie. This was more than responsibility. It was an obsession, a madness he couldn't explain. "Your responsibility is to this pack," Marcus shot back, "not to a nameless stray who could get us all killed." Before Kalen could retort, a soft moan came from the cot. Both men froze. The girl's eyelids fluttered. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, slowly opened. They were filled with a fog of confusion, which quickly sharpened into pure, unadulterated fear as she saw Kalen looming over her. She flinched, trying to scramble away, a cry of pain escaping her as her injuries protested. "Easy," Kalen said, his voice softer than he'd intended. He held up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here." Her breath came in short, panicked pants. Where am I? Who are you?" Her voice was a fragile whisper. Who am I?" Amnesia. The healer had warned it was a possibility. The trauma had shattered her memory. She was a ghost, unmoored from her past, with nothing but the terror that had been inflicted upon her. Kalen felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. She had nothing, no name, no pack, no memory. He looked down at this broken, terrified woman, and the weight of his decision settled upon him. To keep her was to invite war. To cast her out was to send her back to the wolves who had tried to kill her. His pack or this stranger? His duty or this inexplicable, all-consuming instinct? For the first time in his life, the ruthless alpha of Blackwood was torn. He looked into her frightened sea-green eyes and knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that whatever choice he made, it would cost him everything. "You are under my protection," he said, the words sealing their fate. "I am Kalen, and until you remember your name, we will call you Willow." The days that followed were a strange torment for Kalen. He was an alpha accustomed to control, to a world that bent to his will. Willow, in her quiet, wounded state, shattered that control without even trying. He found himself altering his entire routine around her. He took his meals in the infirmary, sitting in silence while she picked at her food, her eyes never quite meeting his. He postponed meetings with neighboring packs and ignored Marcus's increasingly dire warnings about Silver Moon's posturing at their border. His world had shrunk to the four walls of this room and the fragile woman at its center. He tried to maintain his distance, to project the cold authority his pack expected of him, but he would see her flinch at a sudden noise, and the urge to wrap her in his arms and kill whatever frightened her was so overwhelming it left him breathless. He would hear her cry out in her sleep, tormented by nightmares she couldn't remember upon waking, and he would find himself standing outside her door, his hand on the knob, fighting the instinct to go in and guard her through the night. Willow, for her part, remained a creature of fear and shadow. She spoke little, answering his questions with single words or a slight shake of her head. The only thing that seemed to bring her a flicker's comfort was the small leather pouch, which she never let go. During a moment when the healer was changing her bandages, it fell from her grasp, spilling its single content onto the floor. It was a moonstone, milky and smooth, that seemed to absorb the light in the room. Kalen picked it up. The moment his skin touched the stone, a strange warmth spread up his arm, and for a fleeting second, Willow's scent, honeysuckle and rain, intensified so powerfully he felt dizzy. She gasped, her eyes wide, and snatched the stone back, clutching it to her chest as if he had tried to steal her heart. After that incident, a fragile thread of connection began to weave between them. She started to look at him, her gaze lingering for a second longer each time. She saw what others did not, the way his shoulders tensed when the healer examined a particularly nasty wound, the subtle way he positioned himself between her and any pack member who entered the room. He was a fortress, and she was, inexplicably, the treasure he guarded. This did not go unnoticed by the pack. His focus on Willow was a source of constant gossip and unease. Delia, a high-ranking she-wolf who had long harbored ambitions of becoming his Luna, was particularly incensed. She saw Willow not as a victim, but as a rival. One afternoon, Kalen was returning from a tense border patrol when he heard raised voices from the infirmary. He broke into a run, his heart pounding with a cold dread. He burst through the door to find Delia standing over Willow's cot, her face contorted in a venomous sneer. "Nothing but a wolfless stray," Delia was hissing, her hand raised as if to strike. "An omega slut who bled all over our alpha to trap him. He'll tire of you, he'll throw you to the dogs once he realizes what you are." Willow was pressed back against her pillows, her face pale, her entire body trembling. She wasn't looking at Delia, she was staring at the wall, her expression one of vacant horror, as if the words were ripping open a wound far deeper than any claw mark. A growl tore from Kalen's throat, a sound so feral and full of murder that Delia froze, her face draining of color. "Get away from her!" Each word was a death sentence. Delia spun around, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Alpha, I was just—" "I know what you were doing," he cut her off, advancing on her slowly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. "You threatened someone under my direct protection. You raised your voice to her. You raised your hand to her." "She's a nobody, a weakling," Delia spat, desperation making her reckless. "She's making you weak." That was the final mistake. With a snarl, Kalen grabbed her by the throat, his fingers tightening as he lifted her effortlessly off the ground. She choked, her claws scrabbling uselessly at his arm. "You will never speak to her again," he growled, his eyes flashing with the golden light of his wolf. "You will never look at her again. You will never come within 50 feet of this room again. If you do, I will not be this merciful." He threw her from the room. She landed in a heap in the hallway, gasping for air. He slammed the door, the sound echoing the violent tremor running through him. He turned back to the cot. Willow was curled into a tight ball, her arms wrapped around her knees, silent tears streaming down her face. The sight of those tears extinguished his rage and left a hollow ache in its place. He walked to her side, his movements stiff. He didn't know how to offer comfort. The language of gentleness was foreign to him. He sat on the edge of the cot, the mattress dipping with his weight. He didn't touch her. He just sat there, a silent, brooding presence. After a long moment, her soft, broken voice filled the silence. Is that what I am? Wolfless?" The word was a curse among their kind. To be without a wolf was to be incomplete, an outcast. He didn't know the answer, and the lie he wanted to tell her stuck in his throat. I don't know," he admitted, the truth costing him more than he expected. She finally looked at him, her sea-green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Why are you protecting me?" It was the question that haunted his own mind. Why was he jeopardizing his pack, his authority, his entire world for her? He could give her the logical answer. She was on his land. But that wasn't it. "Because when I found you," he said, his voice a low rumble, "the thought of anyone else ever putting that look of pain on your face, it was unacceptable." It was the most honest thing he had ever said. It was a confession, a raw, bloody piece of his soul laid bare. She stared at him, and in her eyes he saw not fear, but a flicker of dawning understanding. She reached out a hesitant hand, her fingers brushing against the back of his. Her touch was like lightning, a jolt of pure energy that shot straight to his core. He didn't pull away. He simply sat there, his world tilting on its axis, as this small, broken woman began to breach the impenetrable walls of his heart. And he knew, with a terrifying clarity, that he would let her. He would let her tear them down stone by stone, until there was nothing left but him and the desperate, savage need to keep her safe. The fragile peace between them was shattered a week later. The blare of the pack's warning horn echoed through the valley, a sound reserved for only the most dire of threats, an imminent attack by a rival alpha. Kaelin was by Willow's side in an instant. She was stronger now, able to walk, but the sound sent a tremor of remembered fear through her. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice all alpha. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." She nodded, her eyes wide with fear for him. That look, that flicker of personal concern, tightened something in his chest. He left her, storming out to the great hall where Marcus was waiting, his face grim. "There at the gate," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Alpha Silas of Silver Moon. He's not here for war. He says he's here to collect his property." The word property sent a spike of ice through Kaelin's veins. He strode to the main doors and threw them open, stepping out onto the grand veranda. Below, at the edge of the clearing, stood a delegation of a dozen wolves. At their head was an alpha whose scent was a foul mix of arrogance and cruelty. Silas was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with eyes as cold and gray as a winter sky. "Kaelin," Silas called out, his voice smooth and mocking. "I believe you have something of mine, a runaway pet. She's small, pale, answers to the name Ilara. I've come to fetch her." Kaylin's hands curled into fists. Ilara. Her name was Ilara, and this monster was claiming her. "There is no one here by that name," Kaylin lied, his voice a low growl that carried across the clearing. Silas chuckled, a thoroughly unpleasant sound. "Oh, I think there is. She stole something from me before she fled, a bauble of some sentimental value. You see, Ilara is my mate. A flawed one, I'll admit, wolfless, a disgrace. I rejected her, of course. The punishment for her weakness and her theft, well, you've seen the results. Now, be a good neighbor and return what's mine." Every word was a hammer blow to Kaylin's soul. Mate, rejected, wolfless. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her terror, the scent of another alpha faintly clinging to her. The reason her wolf felt so weak, it wasn't there. He had taken in the rejected, wolfless mate of his most bitter rival. The inexplicable pull he felt, the phantom mate bond his wolf had screamed for, was nothing more than a biological echo, a cruel trick of his senses, responding to a female who belonged to another. He felt like the world's biggest fool. The protectiveness, the tenderness, it was all for nothing. She was a liability, a disgrace, a weakness, everything Delia had accused her of being. His heart, which had just begun to thaw, froze over, colder and harder than ever before. Rage, icy and pure, washed away everything else. Rage at Silas for his cruelty. Rage at Ilara for her deception, however unintentional. But mostly rage at himself for his own stupidity. He turned without a word and stalked back into the pack house. His pack members parted before him, sensing the murderous aura rolling off him. He didn't go to the infirmary. He went to his study and slammed the door. He needed to think, but his mind was a maelstrom of betrayal and fury. Marcus followed him in. "Kaylin, what are you going to do?" "He's right," Kaylin bit out, the words tasting like ash. "She's his rejected mate. By law, she belongs to him until he formally severs the tie. To keep her is to declare war on a pack that outnumbers us 2-1. "You can't be considering it," Marcus said, horrified. "After everything, you can't just hand her over to that animal." "I am an alpha first," Kaylin roared, sweeping a stack of papers off his desk. "My duty is to this pack, not to some wolfless stray who brought another pack's trouble to my door." The words were cruel, a direct echo of Delia's taunts. He said them to convince himself, to rebuild the ruthless persona he had let crumble. But as he said them, he saw Ilara's face in his mind. Her tear-filled eyes, her hesitant touch. The memory was a knife in his gut. A soft knock came at the door. It was the healer, her face pale. "Alpha, it's Willow, Ilara. She heard everything." Kaylin's blood ran cold. He pushed past the healer and strode down the hall. The infirmary door was open. Ilara was standing in the middle of the room, fully dressed, her meager belongings in a small bundle at her feet. She was no longer the frightened amnesiac. The confrontation had shocked her memories back into place. Her face was a mask of profound, soul-deep heartbreak. The fear was gone, replaced by a devastatingly calm resignation. She had remembered her life, and with it the certainty that she was worthless, unlovable, and destined for pain. "It's true then," she said, her voice hollow. "Everything he said." Kaylin couldn't speak. The lie he wanted to tell, the denial he wanted to shout, died on his lips. "I'll go with him," she continued, her gaze fixed on a point just past his shoulder. She wouldn't look at him. She couldn't. "You were right. I'm a liability. Thank you for your kindness, Alpha Kaylin. I won't cause you any more trouble." She tried to walk past him. Her scent, honeysuckle and rain, now mingled with the gut-wrenching aroma of absolute despair, washed over him. His every instinct screamed at him to stop her, to lock her away where nothing and no one could ever touch her again. But the cold, hard logic of an alpha at war held him paralyzed. His duty, his pack. He stepped aside. He let her walk past him. The look of quiet, final betrayal she finally gave him as she reached the hallway was worse than any physical blow. It was the look of a heart shattering. And he knew, as he watched her walk toward the monster waiting for her, that he was the one who had delivered the killing blow. He was no better than Silas. He had protected her from the world, only to break her himself. The silence in the hallway after she was gone was absolute, filled only by the sound of his own heart turning to dust. Kalen stood frozen in the hallway, a statue carved from regret. He could hear the sounds from outside, Silas's triumphant laugh, the shuffling of feet as his guards surrounded Alara. Every sound was a new crack in his icy facade. He had made the logical choice, the Alpha's choice. He had protected his pack from a devastating war. So why did it feel like he had just ripped out his own lungs? He saw the scene in his mind, Alara, her shoulders slumped in defeat, her face a pale, emotionless mask. She was going back to a life of torture and humiliation, and he was the one sanctioning it. The image of her broken body in the woods flashed before his eyes. That was what awaited her. No, the word was a strangled whisper, torn from the deepest part of his soul. It wasn't the Alpha who spoke. It was the man. It was the wolf. It was the part of him that had recognized her from the very first moment as something precious, something worth fighting for. His control shattered. With a roar that was pure, untamed beast, Kalen launched himself down the hall and burst out onto the veranda. Down in the clearing, Silas had just grabbed Alara by the arm. "Come along, pet. It's time to continue your lessons in obedience." He reached for the leather pouch at her waist. "And I'll be taking this back. The Heartstone of the Moon doesn't belong to the Wolfless." The moment Silas's fingers brushed the pouch, it erupted in a flash of blinding silver light. Silas screamed, snatching his hand back as if burned. The light pulsed, a living, breathing thing, flowing from the pouch and enveloping Alara. Her head snapped up, her eyes no longer dull and resigned, but blazing with an ancient celestial power. Memories, not just of Silas, but of centuries, flooded her. The stone wasn't stolen. It was her birthright, passed down through a hidden maternal line of shifters who were not bound to the earth, but to the moon itself. They were not wolfless. Their wolves slept, waiting for a moment of absolute despair or absolute love to awaken them. Her mother had given her the stone, telling her it would protect her when she needed it most. Silas's rejection, his cruelty, Kalen's final betrayal. It was the crucible she needed. The pressure had forged her into something new. As the light receded, she was still standing there, but she was different. Taller, somehow. Stronger. The aura of a victim was gone, replaced by the quiet, unshakable power of a queen. Seeing that light, seeing the transformation in her, was all the catalyst Kalen needed. The last vestiges of logic and duty burned away in a wildfire of pure, possessive rage. He vaulted over the veranda railing, landing on the ground in a crouch, his eyes glowing gold. "Get your hands off her," he snarled, the sound vibrating with killing intent. Silas stared, first at Alara's transformation, then at Kalen's sudden reversal. "Changed your mind, have you? She's still my rejected mate. The law is the law." "Your law ends at my territory line," Kalen shot back, stalking forward. And she is under my protection. That is the only law that matters here. It was a declaration of war. He knew it. His pack, watching from the house, knew it. Silas knew it.
"Fool," Silas spat. "You'll die for this worthless bitch!" He lunged, shifting mid-air into a massive, grizzled gray wolf with eyes like chips of ice. His guards shifted around him, a wall of snarling teeth and raised hackles. Kalen met the charge, his own shift a seamless, brutal explosion of power. He was larger than Silas, a jet black wolf whose size and strength were legendary. He was the butcher of Blackwood for a reason. He slammed into Silas's guards, a force of nature, tearing through them not with strategy, but with absolute fury. He took a slash to his shoulder, a deep bite to his leg, but he didn't slow. His only focus was the gray wolf that was now stalking toward Ilara. Ilara, however, was not cowering. She watched Kalen fight for her, this ruthless alpha sacrificing everything for her, and she felt the final lock on her own power break. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she called to the animal within. It answered with a celestial howl. Her own shift was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It wasn't a painful contortion of bone and sinew. She was consumed by moonlight, her form dissolving and reforming into a creature of breathtaking beauty and power. She was a wolf, yes, but her fur was the color of liquid silver, and her eyes shone with the soft, steady light of the moon itself. She was smaller than the alphas, but she radiated an energy that made the air crackle. Silas stopped dead, his wolfish jaw dropping in shock and terror. Impossible! Ilara let out a cry that was both a challenge and a song, and launched herself at him. She was faster than he could track, a blur of silver light. She didn't fight with brute force, but with a dancer's grace, her claws and teeth finding every weak point in his defense. Kalen, having dispatched the guards, turned to see Ilara holding her own against the rival alpha. Pride and awe surged through him, so potent it nearly brought him to his knees. She was magnificent. She was perfect. She wasn't wolfless. She was more. He joined the fray, and together they were unstoppable. They moved as one, a seamless dance of darkness and light, of brutal strength and ethereal grace. Kalen would force Silas into a vulnerable position, and Ilara would strike. Silas, facing two fronts, overwhelmed by a power he could not comprehend, began to falter. With a final, coordinated attack, Kalen clamped his jaws around Silas's throat while Ilara swept his legs out from under him. The gray wolf hit the ground with a sickening thud, whimpering in submission. Kalen held him there, the killing pressure ready, his eyes seeking Ilara's. She gave a single sharp nod. This wasn't her kill, it was his. But Kalen hesitated. Killing Silas now would mean unending war. He looked at Ilara, at the pack watching them, at the bleeding but beaten silver moon wolves. He made a choice. He released Silas, who gasped for air, scrambling backward in the dirt. "Go," Kalen growled, his voice amplified by the wolfish throat. "Tell every pack you meet what happened here today. Tell them that Ilara of the Moon is under the protection of the Blackwood pack. That she is not rejected. She is claimed. She is mine." He shifted back, standing naked and bleeding before the stunned audience. Ilara shifted a moment later, her silver glow slowly fading, leaving her standing with a newfound confidence. Kalen walked to her, ignoring his injuries, ignoring the gasps of his pack. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs gently brushing her cheeks. "Mine," he repeated, softer this time, for her alone. It wasn't a statement of ownership. It was a plea, a promise, a prayer.
She leaned into his touch, her eyes shining. "Yours," she whispered, sealing their pact. The war wasn't over, but the battle for each other was won. In the aftermath, a strange calm settled over the Blackwood pack. Silas and his remaining wolves had fled, their tails between their legs.
The immediate threat was gone, but the political landscape had been irrevocably altered. Kalen had challenged an established law, protected a shifter of an unknown and powerful lineage, and declared war on a neighboring pack, all in the span of an afternoon. His pack members looked at him differently now. The fear was still there, but it was mingled with a new, grudging respect. They had seen him not just as a butcher, but as a king willing to bleed for his queen. And Ilara was a queen. They looked at her with awe. The wolfless stray was gone, replaced by a woman who held the light of the moon in her eyes. She moved with a quiet confidence that commanded more respect than any shouted order. She was not the Luna they had expected, but they knew, without a doubt, that she was the Luna they needed. Delia and her cronies, seeing the shift in power, quietly packed their bags and vanished in the night, knowing there was no place for them here anymore. Later that evening, in the quiet of Kalen's chambers, the enormity of it all finally settled. Ilara was tending to the deep gash on his shoulder, her touch gentle and sure. He had refused the healer's help, wanting only her. "You're hurt," she murmured, her brow furrowed with concern as she carefully applied a salve. "They're just scratches," he grunted, though his body ached with a profound exhaustion. He was looking at a long, thin scar on her forearm, a pale white line against her skin that he hadn't noticed before. It was old, but it mirrored one of the fresh wounds he had just inflicted on one of Silas's guards. "I'm so sorry, Kalen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've brought a war to your doorstep. I never meant." He cut her off by placing his fingers over her lips. "You brought nothing I didn't choose, Ilara. The choice was mine. I chose you." He captured her hand, turning it over to trace the scar. "I saw you, lying broken in the woods, and my wolf went mad. I thought it was some phantom mate bond, an echo because you belonged to him. I was a fool. I was so blinded by pride and law that I couldn't see the truth." "What is the truth?" she whispered, her eyes searching his. "The truth," he said, his voice dropping to a raw, vulnerable place she'd never heard before, "is that my soul recognized you long before my mind did. It knew you were the other half of me, not because of a bond, not because of law, but because of this." He took her hand and placed it over his heart. "Because you are the only thing that has ever made this feel like it was worth having." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was not frantic or desperate, but a slow, deep claiming. It was a promise of shared dawns and guarded nights, of healing and strength. When they broke apart, the heartstone, which now rested on a simple leather cord around her neck, was pulsing with a soft, warm light, its glow reflecting in their eyes. "I am not the ruthless man I was, Ilara," he confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "Good," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips, "because I have no intention of ever letting him come back." He led her to the stone balcony that overlooked the vast, dark expanse of his territory. The moon was high and full, casting a silver sheen over the forest. It was the same moon that had witnessed her pain, and now it was a witness to her reclaiming. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. Her hand found his, their fingers lacing together. The air was cool, but they were warm, cocooned in their own world. The path ahead would be fraught with danger. Silas would not forget his humiliation. Other packs would view Kalen's actions as a threat.
But none of that mattered in this moment. He was no longer just the butcher of Blackwood, the alpha who ruled through fear. And she was no longer Ilara, the rejected, the broken, wolfless girl. They were Kalen and Ilara, Alpha and Luna, darkness and light. A new legend was being written for the Blackwood Pack, one not of ruthlessness, but of a savage, unconditional love. And as they stood together under the watchful eye of the moon, they knew they would face whatever came next together.